Welcome in, y'all. It's good to be with you here today at noon. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. And if not, I hope you get to have some lunch soon. If you're on the Pacific, anyways. Um, we're excited to be with you here today. This is a presentation that we're offering as part of our grassroots fundraising campaign, All Hands on Deck. So thank you for plugging in. We're really excited about this presentation because we get to show a little bit of how the Law Center works. And we find that sharing things that we just engage with day to day really gets renewed when we share it with people and who engage with it for the first time. It makes us feel excited as if it's a new concept to us as well. So um, yeah, we're really hyped about this.
Yeah, and I've been with the Law Center for 5 years now, and this process has helped me see some of the origins of some of the practices that we have. So just in the unpacking, I've learned a lot myself.
Cool. So before we get started, maybe we should say who we are. This picture of mine is funny, actually. I need to renew it.
Mine's funny too. I barely recognize myself.
Do you want to go first,
Sure.
Christine?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine. I've been at the Law Center 5 years, and I'm Director of Resident Empowerment.
Cool. And I'm Dorian Bayan. Also been at the Law Center for 5 years, going on 6 now. Christine and I actually started at around the same time, so twin born Selkies.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's good to be with y'all. So, this is our roadmap for today. Quick intro, you know who we are now. We're going to talk about what IR is and what its analog and origin might look like in another conventional setting. Touch base on the Law Center structure so that you understand what the internal resilience circle, how it fits into the bigger picture. We'll talk about the background of the circle itself, the roles of the internal resilience circle, and then we'll leave some space for questions, just ponderings from you all as well. Awesome. So I'm gonna start our story with just at the peak of the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the 20th century with a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor. So Taylor was an American mechanical engineer in the 20th century who became obsessed with improving efficiency in an industrial setting. And he's actually coined as the first management consultant, which is really funny to me because when I think of a management consultant, I think of like Brene Brown, for example. So it's just yeah, I don't know. That was amusing to me. So after many years, Taylor, who we see here, would go on to publish this book called The Principles of Scientific Management, and it would set the basis for work management in capitalism. This whole theory of scientific management today is known as Taylorism, and it's not to be confused with the Swifties. Those are other kinds of Taylorists. So Taylorism is characterized by 4 principles. So it's true science over rule of thumb, which means, creating systems, a scientific selection of the best workers um, for the job, so merit, clear division of labor between workers and managers, so setting standards, and cooperation over individualism. Um, so this framework was developed in a factory work setting, and it was developed also in a context where productivity was much more easily measurable. A century later, though, we have a practice that takes much of its inspiration from this development of scientific management still today. And so, in order to understand how we arrived at the internal resilience circle, we have to first understand what the role usually looks like in more conventional work settings, and who fills that setting. So while we don't actually have a direct analog to the internal resilience circle, the closest one I can think of is this concept of human resource management, or HR, as is commonly referred to. Go to the back one still. No, you're good. It's actually right here. Perfect. Yeah, there you go. So let me just say that word one more time, which is strange, right? Human resource management. What a strange word. And so where did it come from? Here's a common definition that gets used in the industry from the Handbook of Human Resource Management, and it describes it as a strategic and coherent approach to the management of an organization's most valued assets, the people working there who individually and collectively contribute to the achievement of its objectives. So if we look a little closer at the field of human resource management, we actually see that there's four schools of HRM, or employment relationships, as the industry calls them. The first one is this school called the neoliberal egoist, and we're getting a little into the weeds here, but it's going to come all together, I promise you. So the neoliberal egoist school is this idea that there are rational agents pursuing individual self-interests in economic markets. Employees' objectives are assumed to be income and leisure, and the objective of employers is profit maximization. Labor is seen as a commodity, no different from other productive resource. And then the state's role here is to protect property rights and enforce contracts in order to foster free economic transactions. In this sort of school of thought, labor markets are seen as what's called perfectly competitive. So the primary driver is this of the employment relationship, of a perfectly competitive employment relationship between individuals. This relationship here highlights self-interest over conflict and power. So in the neoliberal egoist school, conflict is actually not even really a thing. The unitarist relationship is a different school. So employees are seen as psychological rather than human or economic beings. Oh, and their rational decision making is not so emphasized as it is in favor of behavior elements instead, right? So instead of thinking of a rational person, you're thinking of a person with behavioral elements who believes in fairness, responds to social pressure, and has cognitive limitations, so more psychological person. The economic interests in this school are de-emphasized in favor of psychological interests. I think the biggest part here in the unitarist relationship is that there's a unity of interest between the employer and the employee, right? So these are two things that come together. And so conflict, again, is not seen as a cornerstone of this relationship, except in interpersonal settings. So what do we have next? Next, we have the pluralist, and this is actually a school that's pretty common that you might see in a lot of contemporary settings today. And it's a little bit of a hybridization of the first two schools, right? So we see employees as complex economic and psychological agents that, as human beings, are entitled to key rights, such as equity and voice. This perspective rejects the unitarist view and believes there's a plurality of interests in the employment relationship. Some are common, some are conflicting. So there is a little bit of conflict in that. And it's actually seen as natural. So the pluralist employment relationship is always a bargain exchange between stakeholders with some competing interests, which the terms of this exchange are influenced by the different elements of an environment. So that also includes like the state, the market, those shape how people are able to engage in the workplace. And now we get to the fourth school. So this is where I was leading us all along, because I think this really reflects what our intention is with the internal resilience circle. The critical school is actually something we call the Braverman school too. Sees as conflict as natural. So right, conflict is always at the center of this relationship with labor. And it needs to be managed rather than eradicated or avoided like other models try to do. We see this school also follow with along the lines of like Marxist thought, and employers are seen here as owners and controllers of the means of production, which provides both the incentive and the means to continually push for greater profits at the expense of the workers. So what does that do? It creates elite rule, and it also creates a reproduction of domination.
Boo.
So I want to focus a little bit on that. This is a Braverman sort of, the Braverman school that we're really focusing and really drawing a lot of the inspiration for the internal resilience circle. Harry Braverman developed this theory called labor process theory, and it's still super influential, even though this was written in the 70s. So labor process theory is an alternative interpretation of what would be commonly called human resource management. So it's a different take on HR than what I just described. And he essentially sees the elements of Taylorism, right, which is the origin in a lot of ways of HR, still very much rampant in our HR, in sort of our interpretation and just normalization of HR. So even though he wrote this in a post-war context when the country was heavily deindustrializing and the factory floor was less prevalent, he noticed the same concepts were still at play. So even though throughout the course of history, labor relationships changed, in a capitalist system, the constant was always an outcome that favored the capitalists, the owning class, the elite. So there are a couple of things about labor process theory that feel relevant to why the internal resilience exists today. The first is this idea that there's a dissociation of labor from the skills of the workers. So, our craft, our traditions, our knowledge are rendered obsolete in this process. What matters in this process is that management practices are put into play, what management practices are put into place. So, in other words, the holistic worker and all their skills and life experiences, they're no longer relevant in this context. The second is that's the title of the book, right? Degradation of work. So to Braverman, as in traditional Marxist thought, the fact that the work is fragmented is very detrimental. We might think of the traditional example of a factory worker being assigned a discrete task. So rather than building the whole car, for example, you're now just installing the tires. And that is a sort of degradation of labor that takes you away from the full creative process. Which takes us to this idea that work is divided between bosses and workers, right? And so the bosses do the work of conception while the workers do the work of execution. Um, and to Taylor, in Taylorism, the science of work must never be created by the worker. That was the cornerstone of Taylorism, that it must never be created by the worker, always by the manager. Ultimately, what this does is it removes the human spirit from labor. And so that's what's referred to by Braverman as this creative potential, as what makes a person in their wholeness. And this is what we draw a lot of the inspiration from. How are we as an organization really engaging in the full labor process that we're tasked with as an organization? So what is the IR circle? Well, in definition, the IR circle is a circle that monitors, coordinates, and reviews systems and processes that care for the personal, interpersonal, and organizational health of the Law Center, part of which includes the Law Center's governance structure. Okay, so I just want to note, there we go. There we go. I just want to note that the internal resilience circle only works because we're also a non-hierarchical organization, or what we call a worker self-directed organization. Otherwise, this would risk replicating the notion that one group gets to do the labor of conception while the other group does the work of execution. And just as a refresher, this is a rough map of how our organization is structured. Go to the next one. So we keep calling ourselves an internal resilience circle. What is that? Why so? What do we mean by that? In order to understand this, it's worth looking at this structure of ours that models itself a lot through holacracy. So rather than employ a hierarchy or a hierarchical management structure, we've modeled ourselves as a holacracy with some law center specific modifications. So because of this, we tend to use the word selkocracy. But holacracy situates all areas of work within a circle, with an overarching general circle just holding us all together. And we have different types of circles. Some are considered client circles, and some are considered operation circle. So here in this illustration, the blue circles that you see here are the big super circles that highlight all our work. So land, law, and labor. Then we have various operation circles, not all represented here, but for the most part are all represented here. And the one you see in green here is one of the many circles, internal resilience. And so these circles are all semi-autonomous, but they're all responsive to the larger general circle, which is composed of all us workers holding this work together. And the internal resilience circle is filled voluntarily, and it's swapped out periodically, as all our operations circle are. We generally have the freedom to move around in our client circles as we check in with each other, but operations roles are a little different, right? So we have a more formulated process of swapping operations role, and so that's what we call the operations audit. This happens once a year, and we discuss, what are the roles that we want and that we want to keep? What are the roles that maybe we need some help with? And what are the roles that we want to quit? So for example, here, these are the roles that I fill in operations. And this was sort of my display of all the operations roles so that people could see what I wanted to keep, what I needed help with, and what I wanted to quit. And you see, the little avatars here of the people who were down to help me with the roles that I needed help with. So for example, Christine is now my office co-manager because I was like, I need help with the office manager role. And I actually didn't want to let go of any roles because I like all my operations roles. All right, well, shall we talk about roles at the Law Center?
So firstly, we have our staff retreat team. I love my coworkers and I love spending time with them. Everyone is so cool. But this becomes increasingly difficult with remote work. During lockdown, we noticed that the lack of face-to-face time with each other was really affecting our relationships. It's super important to just be able to co-regulate with people. It makes a difference when you have conflict with someone you feel like you know and you care about versus someone you just see on a Zoom screen. So our annual retreat team consists of rotating slate of 3 to 4 people. We host 2 annual retreats instead of 1, given the reason I mentioned above. During this time, this rotation essentially becomes an event planning crew and coordinates everything from logistics to childcare to programming to meals. We use retreats to highlight a theme that feels resonant with us. For example, our retreat in early May was called All Hands on Deck. During this time, and was meant to reflect the energy that we're bringing to our grassroots fundraising campaign. In the past, we've had retreats called things like Rebuilding Transformational Community or Taking Cues from Nature. Next up is the Conflict Engagement Team, otherwise known as CET, hooray. Historically, our conflict engagement team was just one team of 3 people that got renewed every couple of years. I think our terms are 2 years, or when a position becomes vacant. So this is essentially the interpersonal team that you see here on the left, and this is what this team still does. It's the main point of contact when there's request for mediation. If there's a termination process underway, the interpersonal team also holds the termination process. We noticed, however, that one of the best ways to tend to conflict is to engage it with structural curiosity. In other words, how does our structure create certain forms of conflict or make us susceptible to certain forms of conflict? And how can knowing this make conflict feel less scary? Because of this, we created a second team called the structural team. And this team is a bigger picture team that learn about different organizational conflict engagement approaches that align with CELG's values, explore and create different structures and processes for conflicts that involve large groups or all staff, and looks to identify a clear framework for determining when an interpersonal issue impacts or is impacted by the broader organization and requires engaging in a larger scale process. Oops.
Awesome.
I think I lost my spot.
No, yeah, here we go. Perfect.
Oh, because I tried to scroll down. My bad. Just finishing that up. Okay, so these learnings are then shared by way of trainings and also come in the form of organizational policy changes when needed. Both teams meet periodically to inform each other, and both are responsible for keeping resources up to date for the rest of the organization, such as mediators and external trainings. I think it's important to note that everything is flexible, and at the Law Center, we really tailor things to meet the needs of the group of people that make up the collective at any given time. And so until very recently, we had one group to tackle all of this work. And after 2 years, the term that I was most recently on, we got together and decided that we just needed more ingredients in an ongoing way. And so we decided to divide the group into two and to recruit new team members, new energy, and new enthusiasm. So next is the collective inquiry coordinator. What is collective inquiry? This is the intentional space where we regularly reflect on our personal and collective health and encourage a culture of support and appreciative inquiry that moves us forward. I think this function really speaks to the heart of the circle's work. It's where half-baked thoughts and curiosities come to play. It's usually things that are critical to our organization's strategy, but don't have a direct productive function.
Yeah, so I can share an example. A while back, I noticed that some of our client relationships were being marked by complete deference to our client, which I felt didn't reflect the spirit of collaboration that we pride ourselves in the organization. And that feeling was kind of like sitting with me, right? But I didn't know where to place it. So I just brought this simple question: what is the role of deference in our work? Lightly guided by some learnings that I did with a book that I read by an author named Olufemi Taiwo. And we got to explore where deference felt important, or maybe what an alternative framing to deference could look like, so that we could show up more fully as an organization, and where it was actually maybe detrimental to both ourselves and our client. I didn't really know what to do with that thought at first, but because we had the collective inquiry, I was able to just approach it with a feeling, right? Because it really was just sitting with me. It was a feeling that was sitting with me, and if I had not been able to process that feeling, I might have just carried out that resentment or doubt without anywhere to put it. But because we had a container for questions like this, and I was able to use my curiosity to just deepen the understanding of our work through another element, or like another dimension.
I just want to shout out Dorian and how good you are at utilizing this tool, because I will often have a thread in my mind and I'll let it percolate and sit with it. But Dorian does a really great job of teasing it out and bringing it for group discussion so that we can all consider. And usually what I find to be true is that if I'm thinking something, there's usually at least 3 or 4 other people who are giving the same thing consideration. So this gives us an opportunity to come together and discuss those things.
Thanks, Christine.
So this one's called lunch discussion, and it's entirely different from collective inquiry. I always get them confused. The way that Dorian likes to think of lunch discussion is curious minds versus curious hearts. So maybe there's a new framework that we've seen people in our ecosystem use, and we want to talk about how we orient to it. Or maybe maybe one of us has read a really cool book and we want to use this space to review the book. For example, my coworker recently read Love in a Fucked Up World. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And really wants to share this with other coworkers. So this was an opportunity to do that. And I will say sometimes it's easier for me to navigate this space than it is to navigate collective inquiry. So I appreciate that the two have their own spaces. So we're not by default prioritizing some of this heavier work. Up next is SIM coordinator. So when my lovely coworker Mwende was on maternity leave, I had an opportunity to step in and hold this role. SIM stands for Staff Implosion Meeting, or morning, and it usually involves a set of unruly tasks that benefit from the eyes of all people. So SIMs are 3-hour, they're a 3-hour meeting. So the role of the coordinator is to structure the time and the way and the perseverance of the groups, momentum, and stamina. Because of this, this is the meeting where I hear the most music and get to know what my coworkers are into, said Dorian, because he wrote that line. A sim can be anything ranging from a large research topic that needs multiple people to a big cleanup of our Asana, which we recently went through. And we hold sims 4 times a year, and the accountabilities of the coordinator usually involve appointing facilitators for the meeting, developing an agenda with input from other staff, and coordinating lunch for those of us who participate. Let's see. This role coordinates both the
This is a peer coordinator role? Yeah.
My thing's tiny. Okay. Peer coordinator role. This role coordinates both the self-assessment form, a written peer assessment form completed by at least 2 other staff working within 1 or more overlapping program circles. So those are your peer reviewers, and a performance review conversation with the peer reviewers. So the purpose of the check-ins is to review the staff members' progress on their goals. Self-assessment, it provides an opportunity to personally identify areas of growth and areas of challenge, as well as identify goals for the coming year and professional skills that should be acquired for personal professional development. And then peer assessment. Peer assessment provides core staff an opportunity to give feedback to other members of their program circle, ideally acknowledging both effective behavior and areas that might be improvement. So when I came to the Law Center, I remember the first time that we were doing peer reviews and I was participating, and I was so nervous and anxious and uncomfortable. And I think I was recalling, like, just the energy that I brought to things that I thought were similar. And it was dramatically different, really very, very different. I feel like our peer performance review process is an opportunity for coworkers to reflect back on us, the things that they really value and appreciate. It's an opportunity for us to be like, hey, I always get really uncomfortable when I do this, or to share about things that our growth edges, so that our coworkers can encourage us to tap into resources we might already have in-house, or to attend a training outside, to just grow in the areas that we'd like to be more confident in. And I love reflecting back to my coworkers the things that I see, the ways that I see them show up, and the ways that I see them contribute. And that's how I personally eased into this in a way that was more comfortable, because once I was able to review another coworker, I was like, oh, I really like that, because I got to just share with them all the ways that I really admire how they show up and the work that they do. So yeah. And then to have other people do that is really nice.
Oh, yeah, I'll add, it's really sweet to give your coworkers their flowers, and also just create a safe container for feedback. Like I realize this process has made me really crave feedback in a way that I hadn't before. I'm just like, I just want to stay out of trouble, but now I'm just like, how do I do it better? And it's a great process to have. So I totally agree with you, Christine.
Yeah, it is. It's different being at a self-directed nonprofit, because you don't have those things in place. And while, like, I don't need a boss, there are certain, like, elements and aspects that you would miss, except we just create them differently.
Yeah, it's good to have like accountability buddies and yeah, systems of mentorship too. Awesome. Okay, well, I can pick it up from here. So next up, we have the budget coordinator. We do our own budgeting because we're a worker self-directed nonprofit. And the budget coordinator works with the expense and budget eagle. So as a side note, we usually assign, fun critters to our roles, and they each identify a quality of that critter. So the eagle is more of a big picture role, right? As the eagle glides over the sky. Yeah, just to give you a little bit of context, like what are y'all talking about eagles about? But the budget coordinator role oversees the organization-wide budget process. And as an organization, we get to democratically decide how we spend our resources. Each circle, as I mentioned in the first slide, or in the organization structure slide, is tasked with deciding their own budget, and then we bring it all our budgets together to the general circle, and we deliberate those together and pass a budget. Um, so this is a bit a little bit of how the process looks like. I think they're a great way generally to assess what we're pouring our energy into and how that intersects with our capacity as an organization. So in this sense, this is one of the many ways that we see the labor process very clearly. Like, where is the time and energy in an organization going to? And this process is fairly iterative too, right? So not pictured here is a mid-year revise that we always host in the middle of the year. And also sometimes other forms of participatory budgeting that are just really meant to reflect our democratic process. Next up, we have the Silkocracy Coordinator. So the Silkocracy Steward is a fun role that we rotate every 6 months. And this is actually a great example of what happens in an operations audit, which I talked about briefly, where you kind of lay out your roles and you're like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to keep doing, this is what I want to let go of. Sometimes there's roles that nobody really wants to take. Nobody's really jazzed about them. Maybe they're just like boring or they don't really like light anyone up. So what do you do when nobody wants to take that role? Well, some organizations might just hire somebody external to do that role. Um, in most of our instances, what we do is just actually set a rotation up, right? So somebody just has to hold it for a little bit, and then they have to do that work, and then they get to pass it on to the next person. Um, and I think this role is great, right? To just really get you to dig into the to our law center's like internal policies and learn about them a little better. Um, I actually just finished serving as a coordinator last winter, and it taught me a lot of our policies in a way that actually I didn't think I needed to learn about. Also, I wanted to say, in case you didn't know, our policies are publicly available, and you're free to use them, you're free to adapt them, and you're free to remix them. So we know that a couple of organizations have are used our policies as a template or have drawn inspiration from them, and we invite you to do the same. I think if you just search SELC policy wiki or sustainable economies policy wiki, it'll come up as a publicly available site, and you can see all our policies there. We do strive to have all aspects of our work become a blueprint for a different way of relating to our labor and our organization. All right, so next up is the strategy planning coordinator. So this is also a role that first exposed me to the internal resilience circle, and it's also one that's gone through a few iterations. In an organization that's just teeming with activity, it can be difficult to land on a coherent strategy that all 18 staff can coalesce around. So historically, we had one coordinator, uh, and our strategic conversations just coalesced around like the legal barriers in our work and what organizing we can do around it. So like, is there any policy that we need to mobilize around? It also revolved around our budget, though that role has been more fully developed by the budget coordinator and that role in the internal resilience circle. I want to say that these days the strategy coordinator role is now a crew of three, which is awesome, myself included, and two of my great coworkers. And we're contending with just how to balance different things that, like what at my first glance look like contradictions, but that are just uh, part of the work that we're doing. So we reflect also on our historical moment, like where are we, as Grace Lee Bogg says, like on the clock of the world, right? What is our role in the ecosystem? How do we move energy towards that in the service of time? This is a space that many of our other IR circles roles are also in conversation with. And in turn, this is a space that tries to make more out of the other IR roles. So like things that come out of the lunch discussion and the collective inquiry are really try to be held more comprehensively in this coordinator role. For example, like currently we're holding a strategy session on what it means to have an organization that needs high levels of structure, but also thrives while having high levels of emergence. So ultimately, we're just always keeping an eye towards creating an organization that makes people feel purposeful and happy that they showed up to work today.
Um, okay, last but not least is the
Care
Care
Bears.
Bears. This role was informed through the auditing of our website and resources and realizing that we can always strive to develop accessibility policies and practices that are informed by disability justice, both internal and external to the Law Center. So this role is includes both looking for our accommodations in the organization, and it also involves working with our communication circle to make our website and resources more accessible.
Awesome. Some of the other roles that we didn't mention, but we can just briefly mention, are the social mix master role. So, just the coordinator that makes events happen among us. I feel like we do that a little more organically these days, but it's nice to have a social mix master just to make intentional non-work hangout time. The intern coordinator role, that's actually one of the roles that I coordinate, along with two other coworkers, and that's just the whole system of bringing our internship program into play, and just bringing our great interns into play, which yeah, we currently have two right now. Super rad law school students. Circle coordinator, of course, every circle has a coordinator that just makes the internal resilience circle meetings happen. And then we also have the onboard and offboard team, which actually takes a lot of time. Our onboard process is 6 months. So it takes a while to learn how to just navigate in a worker self-directed nonprofit, and even more than that. But just to say, like, we take a lot of time onboarding our folks when they first come into the organization. And I think these are just also critical roles to the internal resilience circle. And lastly, I'll note, oh, well, just in conclusion, I'll note, um, the labor process belongs to the workers. This is what we're trying to do with the internal resilience circle. We think productivity is only one facet of the work. There's many other works of well-being and what it means to be able to show up to do labor with your coworkers, with your comrades. And lastly, we just think we're really cool. We think the Law Center rocks, and yeah, you should support our grassroots campaign. Um, I'll leave it up for questions. Do y'all have any questions? I don't know. We haven't been monitoring the chat, but oh, actually, before we start with questions, we want to highlight that, as we mentioned at the beginning, our all hands on deck campaign is live, is underway. So please donate today. Christine, do you want to say more about this?
Sure, our goal is to raise 30,000. 10% of your support will go directly to our solidarity partner. This year it's,
Huitlaco.
thank you, mushrooms. It's a worker-owned urban farm serving high-quality culinary mushrooms and fungal-rich compost to the San Francisco East Bay.
Cool.
So cool. These are a bunch of our sponsors for this effort, this fundraising effort. And again, it's all hands on deck because it takes all of us to make this work happen. And then as part of our fundraising effort and campaign, we do offerings like this. We've had a series of them. I think we have one more, right?
Three more actually.
Oh, three
So,
more.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we're currently here, internal resilience roles at the Law Center. Then we have tomorrow, online facilitation in a worker self-directed organization. Then next week we have
Sparkly charms for serious times and an in-person community party.
woo-hoo.
So
Yeah, if you're local to the Bay Area, please come to our community party. Details forthcoming. We just actually sent our emails out, so I should know this.
we just moved into our new home in Preservation Park, which is where
Oh,
we'll be
that's
having our
right.
party.
Here, yes. Awesome. Okay, well
So if you have
now,
any questions?
yeah, let's open it up to questions. Oh, nice. We've got the party details.
Thank
I
you.
can jump in with a question if that's okay. This is Heather I'm on camera to ask my question. I'm the HR director at Climate Justice Alliance. Um, and we get a lot of inspiration from your materials. And I'm curious, we have both exempt and non-exempt staff in our structure, and we find that like we get kind of tripped up in some of our like more values aligned HR culture initiatives coming like in terms of management of non-exempt employees, like time tracking and just the ways that that can sort of feel more limiting to
Mm.
workers. And I was curious if all of your staff are exempt or if you have some of this in practice with non-exempt staff as well. I'll check.
Mm. Yeah, great question. Thanks, Heather. And shout out to Climate Justice Alliance, super dope org that we're a part of too, of the coalition. Yeah, do you have
I
anything to
have a
share?
itty bitty insight, which is that most of our coworkers are full time, and at Selk that's 30 hours a week. I'm actually 20 hours a week, and so I am in a different category from coworkers. And we don't have a lot of staff. This distinction is not like present very frequently.
Mhm.
What I would suggest is coming to our worker self-directed tea time, which it's brand new. So people may know that we've had for many years now a legal cafe, but we now have a cafe that is available to organizations that would like to utilize self-direction as their structure.
Mhm. Yeah, and to speak to that, I mean, Christine and I both started as part-time employees, and then we gradually moved into what's called the general circle. So the general circle then means you're holding the big circle that I shared earlier, and you take part in decisions, and you also have certain accountabilities and responsibilities. And it also comes with other things like, your sabbatical accrual. Yeah, to Christine's point, it's something that, we navigate as well because we do work with certain independent contractors sometimes. We do have interns. And so we're always conscious of how to create that environment of belonging even if that structure is not in play. So just thinking even of our interns, right? They deliberate with us in the general circle and stewardship circle if they want to. They don't have the voting right, but we integrate them as part of our rotation as well. That's a great question. I think it's something that we're continuing to navigate as well.
Dorian and I both came in through the Law Office Studies program, the Radical Real Estate Law School opportunity that was percolating at Selk in 2020.
Awesome.
I just saw that somebody asked a technical question. What tools do we use to stay organized? We use Slack and Asana are our two primary, and then the regular stuff like the Google Suite. But mostly Asana to keep ourselves organized. Each of the circles that we have at Selk, including the IR circle, has a space on Asana that we can all access at any time.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's one of the really nice things about the way that things are set up at Selk. Um, Even though we are a law center, so our client work requires some confidentiality when it comes to HR.
Hmm.
We really, it's different than the conventional setup, and we do share a lot with each other so that we have the whole picture, so that the solutions that we collectively arrive at are informed by what's really going on for people.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely not a corporate question. I mean, I feel like that's, yeah, nerdy in the right way. I'm one of the Asana gardeners actually, so with some of our coworkers, we're trying to find a way to make Asana just feel more intuitive to the flow and like pace of the organization. And I think that's something that we're always measuring is, this idea of like how do we have technology reflect our pace versus like how having technology make us move at a certain pace. And
Drag us
so,
along.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. So I see a couple more here. Oh, nice. How has the IR circle grown at Selk? And how could a very small new organization think about moving into these structures over time?
Well, Silk was quite small when it started,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the most recent program to be added was RELS. And so I thought for us it was strange to be kind of outside of the general circle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think our evolution into the organization was a good fit for me personally. It took me some time to get acclimated to this new way of doing things. Um, and once I joined the general circle, I was like, oh, this is how all of the things that I benefit from as a part-time employee who wasn't participating at that same level. I then was able to step into those spaces where all those decisions were being made. And yeah, I think I lost the question in my
No, that
yammering.
was great. Yeah, I mean, I think it was great. Yeah, so in our example, we started a little more insulated and then slowly kind of integrated ourselves into the organization. I think though, if you're a small organization started, one of the things that we just support, advise in all facets of our work, like co-op development or nonprofit development, is just start with the structure that you need. And so don't overbuild the structure because then it becomes unwieldy itself. So just build as much as you need to be able to relate to your other workers. I think a lot of the times we see people really want to set up the whole like scaffolding, the whole overhead, and then the structure itself becomes bigger than the process. And so we always encourage people for the structure to grow as the process needs. If that makes sense. Yeah, so I think starting as small as you need to start and then growing your capacity only in so far as you need it to grow. So Malaya asked, how do you deal with staff with disabilities in terms of HR confidentiality? Yeah, that's a great question. So that's actually one of the accountabilities of the Care Bears and the Internal Resilience Circle. And so they're tasked with tending to accommodations. And in our policy wiki, I'm forgetting the title of it, but if you search in our policy wiki accommodations, there's an outline process with how staff with disabilities bring up accommodations, and then we also have a process of how to hold that in confidentiality. Oh, thank you, Erica. Erica's one of our Care Bears, so I'm so glad she's here. Erica, do you want to speak more to that? No, no pressure to put you on the spot.
Um, I'll say this is kind of a newer process. So we passed this proposal to have a clearer process for bringing accommodations requests. So we haven't really tested it out yet. So yeah, we're trying to kind of balance sharing the information that needs to be shared and being adaptive to different needs as they arise. But I think in the past we have often defaulted to kind of like sharing information with everybody, but we're trying to create more confidential, streamlined ways of doing that. So,
Mm. Yeah, great point. Yeah, it's been a way to measure or like weigh like radical transparency with also needs of individuals, right? And what confidentiality and discretion that needs, and also just staying aligned with confidentiality. Yeah, thank you, Erica. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. I see Jaden asking, along similar lines, have you ever had to balance team accountability in terms of team members oh gosh, where'd it go? Oh, underperforming with the same sort of confidentiality, right, to privacy stuff? So, like, if there's an issue, how do you have collective evaluation processes that don't violate labor law? Great question. Um, let's see. Is EB here by any chance? Our lovely labor lawyer? She's not. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm thinking of how I would answer that. Also, yeah, any other Selkies on the line if they want to contribute to this one.
The thing that this makes me think of is, so last year, as part of the CET and like working toward internal resilience, um, there was something that we were working through, and so that person had the option to exercise like a restorative practices model, where it involved the whole organization and that person consented to that process. And then as we were figuring out like what that would look like and how we would meet these needs that are being surfaced, we decided that we'd have another process, and that other process would look very different, but that the individual would have the opportunity to choose the process that they felt fit their needs. And so they could opt for a more conventional HR process, or they could choose to involve more staff and have more people aware, in the spirit of the more who knew, the more that would be available to problem solve. And so, yeah, we find ourselves in these tricky situations sometimes where the vision that we have kind of butts up against labor law, and then we have to figure that out. And it could be different case by case, but every time we have a new situation, it's a new opportunity to figure it out, and then we can use those learnings the next time. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, great answer. All right. Yeah, thank you, Monday. CET is our conflict engagement team, one of our internal resilience circle roles. Well, if there's no more questions, we just want to thank you for spending your time with us today, getting to know a little bit of our process. I hope it was insightful and inspiring, and we're here. We're here. Any other questions? Feel free to reach out to us, and
Make sure you come to our party.
yeah, if you're local to the Bay, make sure to come to our party, or if you're not local, you just want to hop in.
And check out the next three offerings.
Yeah,
One tomorrow and two next week.
thank you all.